Rhamondre Stevenson is such a tough player to rank. He's got top 6 to 10, top 7 to 10 running back appeal. The problem is we don't really know what to expect walking into 2023. He kind of like ended the season in doghouse fashion with the whole Raider debacle, the pitch play that he triggered, and the Patriots could have went into overtime, ended up losing the game on a defensive touchdown. Then he had a costly fumble. There's just some concerns. Then they bring in James Robinson. We're going to break that down and decide whether that's even a factor. I'll tell you right now, I'll ruin it. He's not a factor. It's not a big deal. But what do we feel about Stevenson? What's his ceiling? What's his upside? The Fantasy Football Show. It begins right now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Take a lap.
James Robinson was brought in to what? Back up Rhamondre Stevenson. According to Bill Belichick, he'll give us some depth in the backfield, was Belichick's exact words. I'm not worried about James Robinson. I wasn't worried about James Robinson with ETN, even though he did vulture some of ETN's early work and it hampered his beginning part of the season. I'm not worried about James Robinson. He's not a threat. He's no kind of starter. This is Stevenson's team. We do have concerns about the Patriots bringing in another running back, drafting a big name running back, drafting a Charbonnet. What if Sean Tucker falls? What if Kendre Miller falls really far? If they bring in a player at that caliber that I've assessed pre-draft and said, hey, Kendre Miller's a monster. I've said that. Reminds me a lot of Rhamondre Stevenson. Or if they bring in Sean Tucker, I love Sean Tucker. Charbonnet, I don't know what we do in regards to Charbonnet's value and Stevenson's value. I fear that a player like Charbonnet in round 2, a player like Sean Tucker in round 3 or later, or Kendre Miller in round 3 or 4 or later, who knows how far he falls because he didn't have a combine. I'm afraid that someone's parade is going to get rained on. Yet we can't be so cautious that we're like avoiding Stevenson off some off chance that the Patriots draft Charbonnet. So as it stands right now, we've got to look at Stevenson as a potential 7 to 10 running back with upside for even more value than that. He really could be scoring like a Kenneth Walker. He really could be scoring inside the top 5 running backs. Now I have Kenneth Walker higher. I'm not trying to say I have Kenneth Walker, even neck and neck with Stevenson, but Stevenson can produce that kind of season. In 2022, he had 1040 and 5 TDs, 5.0 yards per carry, which was 10th in the NFL. The 5 TDs was tied for 24th. That wasn't a major feat, but he had Damian Harris stealing some touchdowns away from him. So this year, maybe that goes to 7 or 8. 1040 was only 13th in the NFL, but that was still a good number. He was 16th. He was tied for 16th in carries. If we look at his receiving game log, let's look at it over the last couple of years too. Let's look at it for 2022. He had 88 targets and he had 69 receptions. So 69 receptions for 421 and 1 TD. That's a massive receiving total. Now the year prior, 14, like we can't do too much with his rookie year. But with his sophomore year, looking at this stat line, 69 receptions for 421 and 1 TD, 1040 with 5 TDs. The fact that Harris vultured, the fact that this guy didn't have a kung fu grip on the entire workload, there's a lot to be excited about. I think that we want to be safe and package him in some sort of sharing situation where he's the lead dog of the sharing room, the running back room that's comprised of more than just Stevenson. If we're cautiously optimistic, I think we can get a monster home run steal in round number 3. I think if we start drafting him in round 2, let's say he escapes the NFL draft and we all just kind of circle back and say, okay, now that he escaped the NFL draft, just like with other players, I'm going to vault him up. I don't know that I like that idea because in round 3, he's protected to have a similar season. If he has a similar season, you're fine. You earned your round 3 value, and he's a fantastic running back too. And even if you went wide receiver, Pat Mahomes, so you didn't take a running back in the first 2 rounds and you took him in round 3, he's a fantastic running back 1 in that context, in that kind of build for your fantasy team. But if you take him in round 3 and he ends up having another 65 to 70 receptions for 4 450, let's say. So let's call it 70 receptions, 450, or 65 receptions for 420, whatever, and 2 touchdowns, maybe 2 or 3. And let's say he gets 1040 again on the ground, or 1100, but let's call it 1040. But he turns this touchdown number into around 8 or 9 or 10. That's when this guy goes from being a third-round player to, in hindsight, being well worth a top of round 2 pick. So in a nutshell, with Stevenson, he's protected into third round value. Bill will probably draft a rookie or 2 at the running back position. He just does that. But assuming he doesn't draft a Sean Tucker or a Kendre Miller, and if he does, we'll assess it at that moment in time. We'll reassess, we'll recalibrate. I don't know that it'll make me run from Stevenson, to be honest with you. It'll just make me cuff the 2 together. But as long as they don't draft a Bijan, a Charbonnet, a Jahmyr Gibbs, one of my top 3 running backs, Stevenson feels pretty safe in the third round. I'll actually say he seems extremely safe in the third round. I love Stevenson. We promoted him hardcore in 2022. He was one of the running backs we talked about a ton in the offseason. He was a league winner to some of you, and his ADP in the third round is fantastic. To give you an idea of players I like more than Stevenson, though, I would say definitely Kenneth Walker, who's going in like the bottom of round 2 to 3, which is a steal. I mean, this wins a league. Breece Hall is going around 3.1 to 3.3, which is absolute steal. I would take Hall and Walker in a heartbeat over Rhamondre, even though I love Rhamondre. I just want to make that abundantly clear. Who do I like less than Rhamondre? Let's say I take an RB in round 1, or I take an RB in round 2. Then in round 3, I'm drafting Burrow over Stevenson. But if for any reason I've gone, let's say wide receiver, instead of going Burrow in 3, I would actually consider going Rhamondre because I think, I would want to get my running back room kind of tackled early on in the draft. But in general, I would say I've even got Burrow, plus the other 3 QBs over Rhamondre, just so everybody knows. I probably have Stevenson equal to Fields if I was going to potentially go early QB, and I think I lean a little more Stevenson over Fields if I can help it. As far as wide receivers go, give me Garrett Wilson over Stevenson. I think Chris Olave is pretty equal, but I love Olave. I could draft Olave over Rhamondre over Olave. I could go either way. Let me give you a guy I love. I would say Christian Watson, I absolutely love, but he's more of a 4th round to 5th round guy. You'd probably draft Stevenson over Watson, but I still love Watson. I want everyone to know I think he can play that well. Those are just a few comparables to give you an idea of where he maybe falls for me against other players that I rank pretty high. Get on over to thefantasyfootballshow.com to get all your year-round rankings, your trade calculators, your bold predictions, your one-on-one text advice. Everything over at thefantasyfootballshow.com. It's my year-round, not June, July, August. I get things kicked off and going. Yeah, it's things are looking great over there. In June, we'll have the rankings up. This is a 365, 24/7 operation at thefantasyfootballshow.com. So get on over there. Now, get out of here.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Take a lap.